Have you ever been in a relationship where you couldn't really pinpoint why things just didn't seem right? It was off balance. The tension was constant, but you really couldn't identify how or why. Sometimes the issue is the other person, but also sometimes the issue is us. And so in tonight's conversation, we're really going to tackle blame shifting and how can we demand accountability of ourselves and of others. And it's not about trying to tell someone what to do or how to do, but about how to set an atmosphere for with trust, with truth, and with accountability, and of course, above all, with love. All right. So join us as we have this conversation. Chat, we're gonna need your help today. And brothers, let's get ready for this conversation. So, with that said, let's go to the questions. My first question tonight is: in your own words, can you define what blame shifting is?
In my own words, it is shifting the blame from one thing or one person to something else. Um, that's the way I see it in a simple term.
Yeah, yeah. It's simple, like you said, shifting the blame, but failing to accept responsibility for your action and making somebody else responsible for it.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Just transferring responsibility to somebody else.
Absolutely. I think this one is easy. But it's about uh deflecting responsibility instead of owning up to your own mistakes. Um and there's many things that goes behind that. Um
Is it ever okay? And I'm asking a real question because here's why. I have in to save face, right? Sometimes in leadership position we have leaders, and sometimes we maybe have is taking the responsibility the same thing as blame shifting? Because if I'm taking the responsibility for something that someone did to save face or for the betterment of the community or whatever like that, is it the same thing as blame shifting? Because I am shifting the blame from that person onto myself. But is that the same thing? Anybody?
as I'm looking into blame shifting, it's more about the person who is at fault trying to shift it onto someone else. I think taking the accountability when it and so here's the reality though. The way I'm looking at it, like, because now we're talking about leadership. As a leader, if it happens under my watch, part of the accountability belongs to me, anyways. So I don't look at that as blame shifting. I don't know about you, brothers.
Let me hear the question again.
Is me taking blame for something that someone else did blame shifting, or is that just maybe trying to save face for the bigger picture?
And we're talking leadership, correct?
Mm-hmm.
No, because everybody that I'm in charge of, ultimately, I'm responsible for everything that they do. So if they drop the ball on doing a thing, it is ultimately my responsibility. So I don't go into my, superior office and say, oh, well, Garfield did this, so that's why we missed the mark on that. No, I say, you know what? I got it. That's on me. I'll make sure that we correct it going forward. So when we start talking to leadership, that's a whole different animal.
Okay.
Leaders take responsibility for what they're in charge of.
Yeah, I'm a coach because we've all seen some leaders when everything falls short because they don't want to look like the person that did wrong. Instead of taking responsibility for everything, they rather just say, well, such and such was late and this happened and that happened. So they start giving you a resume of what went wrong instead of taking accountability, saying, hey, I got it, won't happen again.
Now, the other side of that is when it's time to praise, right? We leaders don't say, "Hey, no, I did that. That was all me." That's no. The leaders say, "Hey, they did. This is what they did." So I think we have to, especially when we start talking leadership, I think we have to look at it from a different perspective, a more objective approach when it comes down to it. Sure, the leader is ultimately responsible, but who does the heavy lifting, right? So I think that's one of the things when it comes down to the mantle of leadership.
Yeah, I agree with that because I know, at least for all of us here who've been in the military, at some point have experienced where the leader took the praise, but put down the hammer when it came time for taking responsibility for what didn't go well, you know. But I don't know if that would can attribute to blame shifting, but I would say that's still a toxic environment in a relationship. You know, if you take the praise for what happens in this section, shouldn't you also take some of the responsibility for what doesn't go well? So with that said, that kind of takes me to our next question, actually. So the same thing. Since we're talking about blame shifting and accountabilities, in your words, can you describe what accountability is or looks like?
Yep. Accountability to me is taking responsibility for what I did. Period, point blank. I did it. I own up to it. It was my fault. If I need to apologize, I apologize. But in my own words, taking accountability is owning up to my responsibilities on what I may have contributed to.
And along that lines, not just what I'm responsible for, but I'm taking responsibility for that, my actions, as well as any mistakes that happen, decision, and the consequences. So if it's good, cool. If it's bad, cool. Because I'm accepting responsibility. I'm taking full accountability.
Yeah, I think, and I tend to say it this way, in order for us to get a clear picture of accountability, we must first understand responsibility. And so when we look at the things that I'm responsible for, it is the outcome of those things and me taking ownership of it. Going back to the whole leader scenario, if I am a leader, it's not that I go into the office and say, "Hey, Gaddy did that." So, I tighten the screws up on Gaddy. No, that's where I just forego responsibility when I was called to the office to talk about why my team was not able to do what meet their deadline or whatever. But as a leader, when I go into the office, whatever my team does, I'm fully responsible for. Therefore, when it comes down to having to give an account for that, I take accountability for it because that was my responsibility.
Absolutely. Everything that my brothers already said, only thing my 2 cents will put in is what accountability is to me is more than just recognizing that there's a fault. Because I've experienced people say, "Oh no, we both share blame," but I think accountability is actually recognizing what you could have done better, what you didn't do right, and making the necessary adjustments. If you don't make the necessary adjustments to make sure you can mitigate the issue going forward, then you really didn't take accountability. You just say, "Yeah, I did it," and that's how I look at it. And I think that anybody in a relationship with you will see it the same way because your behavior continues on, but there's no change to mitigate the situation.
So I
Yes,
think you
sir.
got a question in the chat. Want me to pull it up?
Yes, please. Yes. And the question of blame shifting, is this just in leadership or just in general? For me, I say in general, in all relationships and all parts of the relationship. But brothers, how do you see it?
I think it would be in general because you don't have to be in a leadership position to be responsible for your actions because it's about me. So whether I'm in a leadership position or not, What I do, I have to accept responsibility for. But if I'm blame shifting now, I'm saying because, oh man, I'm going to go here. A lot of people will say, I used to do it when I was coming up being a person of color, growing up in the environment that I grew up in Detroit. I would always blame other people of a different hue and say, it's because of them that I'm like this. It's because I didn't have this. And I would look everywhere else besides at the person in the mirror to blame to why I was in the situation of the dumb stuff that I was doing. That's just an example.
Yeah, I think, I think in general as well, man, I look at blame shifting plays out in a lot of places. It plays out in relationships. It plays out in court. You see it every day. It blames out when we're driving down the road and someone talking about you cut me off and someone else's fault. You know what I mean? So I think blame shifting is not just in leadership. I think it's in general. And, if we think about it, it's in our everyday life. We see it at work all the time. You know what I mean? Always somebody who don't want to hold up their end of the bargain. You know what I'm saying? I guess it depends on where you work. I'm not talking about all jobs and stuff like that, but I think it's just something in general. I think we see it all the time in our everyday life.
There's an old saying that I'm going to bring to the forefront to answer this question. The hardest person to lead is yourself. So in answering this question, I have to say, yes, it is in leadership position. Because here's the thing I will bring to the table. If I got a newborn baby, can I blame the newborn baby because they didn't eat? So I hate to bring it down and oversimplify it in that aspect, but everybody has a responsibility to lead themselves. That's how we got the job that we got. So in order for me to lead myself, according to said job, I have to fulfill said job description. Well, if I'm in relationship, I have a said job description. So at the end of the day, am I fulfilling the responsibility that I have when it comes down to that relationship that I'm in? And I'm not necessarily talking about, a marriage. I'm talking about any relationship. Am I fulfilling that responsibility? So I think when it comes down to this question, I know we try to separate work and life, but I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we do is separate work and life. We should separate work from our everyday life. But at the end of the day, the way that you behave at work should be the way that you behave at home. But a lot of times what we do is we change gears. So in all actuality, if I am taking responsibility for this vessel that I've been gifted with, then at the end of the day, whatever it is that I am doing, once I have to give an account for it, I have to accept accountability for it, but I can't pass that on to somebody else and say, oh, well, Roland didn't do this, so therefore I couldn't do that. Well, did you go talk to Roland, right? What did he tell you when you talked to him? Did you follow back up with them to see this and to see that, or whatever the case may be? So in this question, I know there's going to be somebody who disagrees with me, and I'm okay with that. But I have to say yes, because at first, you must learn to lead yourself.
I like that you went that route. At first, I was that person like, nah, he wrong. But then as I listened to what you were saying, I'm like, man, he made that clear. First, it was clear as mud, but you cleared that thing right on up. And because it's like, no matter what, that person, whomever it may be, is responsible for self. At the end of the day, I don't care if your position says whatever, but whatever position that you are in, you're responsible for self.
I was hoping that Roland kind of held to his position because I ended up with two questions, right? So I'm gonna stay on Roland's position for a second, just so I can ask this question. But because I do believe general, right? I do believe if you're in a leadership position, the accountability belongs to you. And I also believe that even with Roland, what Roland said is, I think it still kind of leads me to general that you are still responsible for yourself. So if you make a mistake, even though part of the blame goes to the leadership, when you are addressed by leadership for what you've done, you have to take that accountability and correct your action as well. But with that said, can you be correct? Because Roland brought up culture and stuff like that. And I always hear people argue, but this did happen, but this did happen. Can you be correct in what took place and still be guilty of blame shifting?
Most definitely. You can have correct information, but fail to look at your part in the equation. And I think that's where it's skewed, because people will say this happened and that happened and this happened. Yeah, but Pookie ended up in jail. Ain't got nothing to do with this part. It's because he did this. So let's take the responsibility for actions first. Because if you take the responsibilities for your actions, then you can dissect it and say, well, the root of it was this before I was even born. Okay, fine. But your decisions were made through your mind, which is not right here. So how do you not be able to take responsibility for what you've done, not for what was done?
So if I understand the question correct, you're asking, can I be talking about facts and still be wrong? Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. This is why, and I think I mentioned this maybe last week on TikTok or something of that nature. This is why I said that sometimes we miss the point when it comes down to perspective. Just because something is my perspective, it may be fact to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It's fact to me, but that's just my perspective of the entire whole. There are so many different perspectives that go along, and the more different perspectives that we can get closer to what is true. So just because something actually happened that is fact in my eye, I can still be wrong based upon how I interpret it. And then the way that I interpret it, now I am projecting my interpretation out into the atmosphere, and then I'm going to hold you accountable for my interpretation. Well, if your interpretation is false, then say facts. If your interpretation is a false interpretation, then you should not coincide with that. You should, if you guys have a good relationship, you should be able to have a conversation about the false perception of an interpretation so that you two can get closer to what is right. What is right should be relational harmony, not fact. And I think too many times what we focus on, we want to be right as opposed to focusing on what is right. If we focus more on what is right, then we'll take our facts and we'll kind of take that fact and kind of mesh it against what is right. And then what is right should be the thing that moves us forward.
Touche.
I agree. I just had to ask that question because, I used to be one of those people, like Roland said, culturally, I used to be one of those people that's like, well, there wouldn't have been drugs in our community had not the government pumped billions of dollars in the 80s, in the 70s and the 80s worth of crack cocaine into our communities. And they've actually put out documentation admitting it, and I'm like, well, if that hadn't happened, Pookie wouldn't be in jail right now for selling drugs. Like, no, but Pookie still made the conscious decision. So it's kind of that. It's kind of you know what I'm saying. Like, we can add up the facts of what did happen, but at some point we had to make a choice to do or not to do. So I agree there. Yeah, I want to throw this second side question out because Coach said something too, and I'm trying to keep my eyes in the chat as well. So you talked about leadership, and this one I don't want to derail, but when you talked about that leadership is your concept, right? So when we talk about blame shifting, we're going to always say that leaders taking the bulk of the responsibility. Now, I do want to know, just for the sake of conversation, I believe that the man, in the sense, right, in the order of the Most High, man is the head of the house, right? For man is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, right? For he gave up his life for the church. Does everybody in this panel, do we agree or do we have a different perspective? All right. With that said, can we then take that and say, ultimately, in relationships, that men ought to be taking the blame for what goes south or goes wrong in marriages? Yeah, I knew that was going to get some smiles.
I think
that's what it made me think of when he was saying it.
I think you take responsibility for what you're responsible for, but I can't take responsibility simply because if I'm in charge overall. If you out there doing dumb stuff, I've given you information, I've given you help, I've given you guidance, and yet you continue in that vein, that's where separation comes in. Now, because you don't want to follow said leadership, it's best that I separate that thing because we can no longer move together in lockstep because you're not abiding by my leadership, especially if my leadership follows his leadership. So you want to do your own thing. So I think it was Eddie Murphy. He said, "Well, go and do your little la-di-da thing over there." No, that was Ike and Tina.
I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to how you view things. You know, all things, not all things, but I would just answer it like this. I was divorced. I was married for 19 years and I was divorced. At the end of the day, I took it as my responsibility and I was at fault for the reason why the marriage failed, right? I took responsibility for that. Did I have say so in every single action that she did or that I did to cause the divorce? I had something to do with it. She had something to do with it. Maybe my leadership was bad. You know, all of the above. Yes, yes, and yes. So I think that at the end of the day, it's okay to take responsibility. I don't think that it's mandatory, but I think it's okay to take responsibility. And I think that at that point, that allows you to move past. You know what I mean? But I'm only taking responsibility because I was the head of the house. But I also don't take responsibility for the things and every single thing that caused us the divorce. You know what I'm saying? I'm only responsible for me. Can't control anybody or anybody else's actions and how they choose and want to live their life. So I don't have any problem taking responsibility. And whether it's my responsibility or whether it's her fault or not, at the end of the day, it's done and it's over with, and I was able to move past it. So that's kind of how I look at it. Some people maybe want to take responsibility for it, and some people not. Maybe don't want to. But for me and how I live my life, I just took responsibility for it because it made it a lot easier to just move on and not have to focus on what she did or did not do in the marriage and the reason why it failed. It just put all the focus on what I did and not anything that anybody else did in the marriage.
No change to my response from previously. Like I said, we like to separate work and life as though it's different. You go get you a job, you either do what the job descriptions say to do, or you get fired. It's that simple. I think a lot of times people just need to own the fact that they made a bad decision when it comes down to the relationships that they got into. That's not a bad thing to do. I think that's an adult thing to recognize that you made a bad decision. The not so adult thing is to stay in the bad decision and try to turn the bad decision into a good decision. Because in essence, what's going to end up happening is that it's going to get worse, especially when you two are not moving in the same direction. A lot of times we do things at an early age to where We don't necessarily know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. So we do what feels right, thinking that what feels right is right. That's not 100% true. So when it comes down to this question again, there is no change in my original statement. I have to first lead myself. As long as I first lead myself, then I am ready to lead someone else. But I should not try to lead someone else if I'm struggling leading myself. Conversely, you have to first lead yourself. You cannot accept, you cannot go and tie yourself to another person struggling leading yourself and then saying, "Oh, I'm going to hold you responsible because you didn't lead me or and you." No, that doesn't work that way. So when it comes down to it, both people have to look at themselves in the mirror. He gave us a charge over ourselves to do what he told us to do. That's first and foremost. It doesn't change. So once we understand that, then we go into it. And now we go into it with the understanding that he gave clear, concise instructions on what that is supposed to look like. Too many times we listen to everything that everyone else wants to say, but the only thing they're doing is it's like a self-licking ice cream cone. They're just perpetuating the craziness that goes along with it. So they're injecting, oh, well, how do you feel, and how to this and how to that. So focus on all of the things that are unstable in your life, and then build your relationship behind that. That makes absolutely no sense. Why don't you just go and build a house without putting a foundation and just put the what do you call it, the studs? Put the studs directly into the ground and see how long that house stands. Because you're trying to build a house without a good foundation. Therefore, when it all crumbles and falls, now you're trying to figure out why.
I couldn't get to the unmute button fast enough. I I agree. I agree. I had to get that conversation out there on the floor. But I believe in all aspects, right? I do believe that you, in all situations, you have to take accountability for you at the end of the day. Um, and especially if you call yourself a leader, you have to take accountability of you before you can begin to lead. Um, but in the essence of it, I do believe that we have to have accountability when it comes to the choosing process of choosing a mate, and everything that's entailing that. I love this question right here. So, um, Emery M asked, "How do we approach someone who does not know how to take accountability for their actions?" Brother.
I don't.
Ditto.
Yeah, it's like
There's no need having a conversation with someone who's not accountable. Like, you're just wasting your time. It's like arguing with a signpost.
yeah, like if you want to have a headache, if you want to argue by yourself, if you want to raise your blood pressure, yeah. But now, if we talking children or something, but I think we're talking adults, because I think we're above. We're not talking kids. We're talking another adult who failed to do the basics. Why are we even in a relationship? What are we gonna talk about?
I'm with it. I'm with it. That's how a lot of people get fired from their position, as you would say, in all forms of relationship.
I wonder what the dynamics of this question is. Like, who the two subjects are in this question. You know, if it's a leader approaching a subordinate, you know, if it's a subordinate approaching a leader, if it's a friend approaching another friend, if it's a colleague, you know, I think all of those things will determine some of those. Because if you're a subordinate and you have to go to your leader for something and they're not approachable or they don't take accountability, you know what I'm saying? That's different than how you may approach someone who's your friend and they may not take accountability, but it may be something that y'all may need to work through. You know what I'm saying? So I think the relationship kind of determines how you approach it. But
I think
for most cases, if they ain't accountable and I ain't got a relationship with them, and I ain't, you know.
Yeah, for me, I don't think my answer changes, right? If I realize my supervisor is unapproachable and he or she is just going to do what they want to do and create this toxic environment, there's somebody above them that I can go to, right? They're the owner of the business. There's a board typically for that field. That is something that can take, or I can relocate my employment somewhere else. You know, there's that option. If it's my subordinate, right, and I'm the leader, and I've already taken different avenues of mitigating, and that person is like, I'm just going to do what I want to do. Now there's other type of actions I have to take. Things got to go on, you know. And I'm at this point, I'm talking to you to create that paper trail that, hey, I have given you these opportunities to correct the actions. Hey, I'm giving you tools. I'm giving you this. And now whatever actions or whatever steps, depending on who you employed by and the regulations, regulatory guidance and how to take actions after that. But you have to move. I'm not having a conversation trying to change you at this point. I'm trying to get this. Like, you get what I'm saying? So, say again.
What about our children? Does that change?
I think when it comes to the children, it's your responsibility to teach them. So if you've taught them and they fail to be accountable for what you've already entrusted in them, if you stay in that and continue to feed that same little demon the same way, you're not being responsible, taking responsibility for your part. So it's on you then. It's not on them. It's your problem.
So still, how do you approach a child that don't accept accountability? But we have already moved past it. So
hey,
principles don't change. The law of responsibility is in international law context refers to the principle that entities like states, international organizations, and individuals can be held accountable for their actions or inactions, particularly when those actions causes harm or violate international legal norms. For the person who is getting ready to say, well, this isn't a legal matter, it is most definitely a legal matter. Any type of human interaction is a legal matter. So it doesn't matter who the person is. If my child who lives in my house does not actually do the things that they are instructed to do, and they violate the instructions that are given to them, then something is going to happen. Either we're going to have a serious conversation, or there's going to be some type of consequences or repercussions. If we're talking relationship, well, the relationship at first should have governed the behavior of the offender. So when a person does not take accountability for their behavior when shown their behavior, again, that was their choice in the matter. That same relationship that should be bringing us back together should have been the same relationship that prevented them from behaving the way that they behaved in the first place. When it comes down to a work setting, like Gaddy said, if I'm talking about my supervisor, it's time for me to look for a new job. If I'm the supervisor and I have an employee that does not take responsibility for their behavior, they get a couple of times. And after that, time for them to go look for a new job. And I'm going to help them by relieving them of the job that they currently have.
And when it comes to children, I have a lot of pew-pews in my house. It's my responsibility to teach safety about these things. Now, if I have younger ones, now they got to go in the safe. But you talking about the teenagers and all this other stuff, if they were to go and take one of these things and use something and then want me to back them up and say, well, no, I taught you, you knew better, you acted on your own out of whatever. It's not, now it's my responsibility to maintain them. But when you stole it, because that's what it's going to become, because I'm not standing with you in your guilt. See, I think some people feel guilty about some things, and I don't want to treat little Billy like this and little Shay Shay like that. No, sometimes you gotta allow them to bump their heads just like you did. And if they gonna bump their heads in that vein because they didn't listen, they didn't want to be accountable and responsible, take responsibility for their actions, and you relieve that from them, it's your fault.
I tell the same story when people want to argue with me when they're like, "Oh, you whip your children, you spank your children." The same friends that told me when my kids were younger that they don't spank their children and they don't think I should spank my children are the same friends that when the kids got a little older used to look at me out in public and say, "Man, I don't know how you get your kids so well mannered." Remember when you decided you didn't want to spank them and I did? I'm not saying that it's parent how you parent, but when that question is asked just 2-3 years later, I'm like, hey, to this, I tell people now, my kids as are older, my older children, I don't have to spank them. They understand Daddy's crazy. There's a mutual understanding there. And so to this day, when they're at least when they're with me, I can speak. All I have to do is speak now. That's because I've done the hard part when they were younger. I didn't wait till they got crazy and then decided, oh, I need to discipline. No, I put discipline as the foundation of how I raised them early. Now, man, my kids can't remember the last time they got a spanker, but they know there's something built inside of them that know not to try me.
Just wait.
Say again.
Say just wait.
Hey, that's how TJ at that size. I told him I had to put his chest with his spine.
I'm like, how old are your kids? 8, 6,
13. Yeah. But
13.
My oldest, yeah. But and that's just how I look at it. But let's move forward. I'm excited to move into these scenarios. See, everybody decided to use scenarios this month, so I decided to do the same thing, but kind of put a different twist on them. Right. So first, Coach, before we post it up, because I want the chat to join in. Were you able to copy the 5 points? Right. So when we start looking at blame shifting, the forms of blame shiftings, right? We know that they're common in toxic relationships, right? The behavior is often seen in abusive relationships where the perpetrator refuses to acknowledge any of their wrongdoings, and it comes in the forms of denying responsibility. Give y'all in the chat time to remember them: gaslighting, manipulating reality, minimizing or invalidating feelings, projecting their faults onto others, and playing the victim. So I want y'all to remember these, because as I read the scenarios, what I want to do is, brothers, if you can identify which one of these principles fall in line with the said scenario, and then kind of give why it applies there. All right. So with that said, we can go to the first scenario. All right. So let's say you and a coworker name is Alex, are working on a presentation. You were both supposed to contribute equally, but Alex didn't complete their assignment. And during the presentation, it's clear that the section Alex was responsible for is missing, and your boss is visibly upset. So the dialogue goes like this. The boss is Alex. Where are the slides covering the market analysis? Alex, oh, well, I was waiting on some key data from the marketing team, and they were really late getting it to me. By the time I got it, there just wasn't enough time. I told Coach or Unc that I was waiting on the data. So with that dialogue right there, which principle would you apply there?
But it sounded like it was a combination, because he denied responsibility. he say, I did this, but he kind of denied the responsibility, shoved it off on the other people, projecting faults of others, and then he played the victim. Like they're the reason he didn't accomplish his mission. So it sounds like a combination.
I definitely see the denying their responsibility and the why. You know, one thing I want to talk about, I guess, I think it has something to do with is that, you know, it should have never gotten that far. You know what I mean? He should have nipped that in the bud or did what he had to do days before. You know, I mean, he should have had a timeline, should have cut off. He should have did what he had to do, figured out a way around. You know what I mean? Even before it got to that, and then because he didn't do that, you know, he got to the place where he was, I guess he was denying responsibility. I don't think I needed to hear it again. I might have missed some of it.
Well, I definitely agree. Clear, obvious, denying responsibility. I'm with Roland. I agree with the playing the victim as well. And in some slight arena, it could also be projecting faults, because it could have been like some of that person's own insecurities that prevented them from going to talk to the marketing team as well. Right. And so instead of taking the initiative to go talk to the marketing team to see where they are on this key data that this individual needed, they just decided to not do it and then project that out as it's their fault is doing. So again, definitely denying responsibility, definitely playing victim, and it could be a little bit of projecting fault as well.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I see the projecting faults. I'm like, bro, why you wait till the last minute, man? Like, bro, you should have been got that information, bro. I was standing at Joker's door. I'm like, bro, we know. Look, you know, we gotta have this stuff done in 3 days.
And I go a step further. If I go talk to the marketing team, will they tell me the same story that you tell me? So it might be a little gaslighting going on up in there too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like someone said,
gaslighting is distorting reality. So, yeah. Man, I was looking for the chat to jump in there. Okay, I was looking at one of the questions that popped up.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it. Let's look at it real quick. I like this. It's kind of a little bit of a step away, but I like it. So what about the other way around? A parent not taking accountability. Yeah, I think we see it a lot, right? You have situations that happen at school, and sometimes I don't know if it's not taking accountability, but sometimes parents don't ever believe that their child has done something wrong. I've seen parents that go to school and say, "Not my child. My child wouldn't do that. My child wouldn't do that." And their child did the thing, and you laughing because you were educated, so I know you've seen it, you know. And to me, a little bit of that is
that.
You said what? That I just did that? No, that's why I said my kids know how to act with me. but I see that in a sense as the way of blame of shifting accountability. It's like, no, because if you admit that your child did something wrong, then you have to now go back and relook at how you're raising them. At least to me.
But you are right. I do see it. I see it every day. You know, not every day, but on a consistent basis, I see parents not taking responsibility for a lot of stuff. You know, everything is the teacher's fault. I'm gonna be honest. There are districts and there's counties that are not taking responsibility for things. If you want to go a step farther than that. So I think there's a lot of different places where there are adults not taking responsibility, and parenting is no exception than any other thing.
I don't know. I'm with you because I know when my kids were in high school and my daughters got into a fight, and I went up to the school. Some parents will take the position of I'm about to battle for my child, but you know your child also. So I can't go into it trying to save them from punishment for something that they did, but some parents do. Some parents will blame other people. They will minimize and project fault on others. Well, if you would have did this or you would have did that, and then they play the victim as well. So I think a lot of parents deny responsibility because they think that because their child is of a certain age, that it's all on them now. Whereas legally, it's still on you. That's why if something happens and the child got to pay, it's coming out of your pocket, not theirs. So, yeah.
Y'all being nice. I'm just saying, y'all being nice. I love y'all for that too. I'm looking at this from a different perspective. I'm looking at the child going to the parent and having an honest conversation with them about some of the things that are going on in relation to, may not necessarily be parenting practice, may so be around kind of allowing them to develop and grow and all kind of things of that nature. And the issue here can be that some parents won't listen to what that child is telling them, assuming that what they're saying is 100% wrong. It may not be 100% right, but if there's any right in it, you need to listen so that you can understand how both you and that child can grow. That's why I keep saying, like, it's not just the parent teaching the child, it's also the child teaching the parent. And parents learn a lot about themselves as parents when it comes down to their child. I know we like to think that we know best and all that other great stuff. And I'm not saying that that's not the case in most situations, but there are going to be some very difficult conversations that parents need to have with that children need to have with their parents. And in conjunction with that, parents need to listen. And I don't really care how old that child is. My daughter told me the other day, she said, Dad, I want to talk to you about something. I said, come on with it. I'm here for it. And I told her there's no cards left unturned. So whatever you want to talk about, I'm open to it. Except one thing, I'm not going to talk to you about the relationship dynamics between me and your mom. That's the one thing I won't go into detail about, simply because I won't ask you the details about your relationships that you get in as well. So I think in the space of that, I think when you look at this, a lot of parents, they like to use the terminology, I did the best I could with what I had. And from their perspective, they are telling the truth. However, no one, and that includes us, all of us on this panel, no one has ever done the best they could with what they had, because if you had done the best you could with what you had, then your outcome would have been different. I don't care what the outcome looked like now, right? So again, it's not that I did the best I could with what I had. I did what I knew how to do in the time and space that I was in. And if I own that part, then that means that there has to be some other information out there, and it may come from my child, and that may not necessarily feel good, but at the end of the day, growth doesn't feel good. So if I can listen to what my child is telling me, I can learn something about myself, and then I can own it. And from that point on, it creates the dynamics for a better relationship.
So I want to speak to that right there. And initially, it does not feel good. But when you go, if you're a person who processes, when you go back and you process, you do feel good, right? Because you like, darn, like my child has grown, my child knows. So initially it is, but I'm out here to any parent out there, just speaking from experience. If you ever go through this, accept it, you know what I mean, with respect and all these different things like this, but then go back and process it and think about if your child got to the point where they were able to come and talk to you about something that you as an adult may or may not be doing right or wrong or whatever like that. Like you taught them something good, you know what I mean? So I think that's a good thing. Like I said, it can sometimes be uncomfortable at first, but just work through it, and I guarantee you is definitely light on the other side of that.
And I add to you, before you go, Ron, give me one more second. I will add this as well. They may be emotional about what they're talking about. They may not be calm and having, they may be yelling just a little bit. As long as they don't call you out your name, that's okay. Let it happen. Let them get it off, because they may have been holding on to it for so long, and it may have been eating away at the very fiber of who they are. And this is their opportunity to express it. You have given them the floor to speak. Let them speak and own every bit of it.
And I don't even know if we on the same subject now, because I think that's one of the things that where, no, seriously, because I think that we stunt children's growth when it comes to becoming themselves, speaking up for themselves, because if they, oh, you're going to watch your mouth, it's like, okay, I'm excited about this thing, or I'm in the moment. I'm not disrespecting you. I'm just trying to get my point across. So we nullify their voices. And then we say, well, why you ain't come talk to me when something happens? You shut them down at each and every turn. But now you when something happens and it occurs, you want to say, well, why they didn't come to you? Because I know that if I come to you, you're going to shut me down. I can't just say stuff. I can't get it off my chest. You going to shut my mouth every 5 seconds because I'm being disrespectful when all I'm doing is trying to express myself.
I think we had a similar conversation a long time ago, talking about parenting and parenting. I think we talked about shifting from parenting minors to parenting adults. And I think what happens so often, and I think I said this back then, is that we forget to transition from authoritative. I can't even get the word out right. To look, I know remixing the word to mentor. We forget how to shift, and so we try to stay in that space of you do it my way or you see it my way, and it leads to everything what everybody else just said. You really stunt your child. Or you cause your child, while they're in the process of becoming their own, you cause them to kind of break away from you in that early adulthood life. And you're like, I don't know, our relationship is not the same, because they're not looking for someone to tell them how to live their life as an adult. They're looking for someone to give them mentorship and guidance. And that oftentimes our children end up looking for people outside of us for answers, because we've become what they don't need, or we try to continue to look at them as that 6-year-old, 8-year-old child, that 10-year-old child. At some point, we got to turn to someone who they can come to. I know I just can't get it out. Couldn't get it out. But thank you, sis. But we forget how to transition, because now my parents are both gone, but at almost 40 years old, I don't need someone to be like, no, you better do it like this, you better do it like that. I need someone that says that actually sits down with me and explain to me, well, I've done it this way, I've seen this not work, or let me show you some better ways, let me show you options. Like, become a mentor. I'm not telling you to become a friend, because some parents don't believe in being friendly to their child, but being a mentor is a thing, and so and it kind of goes to where Coach kind of said, like, I did do what I knew to do because of where I was, what I had available, or what I knew. This is all I knew, and not that it was the best that I could do, but that's all I knew. But now, as I got older and I learned more, I can continue to teach. But it looks different. But yeah, I like it. Let's move forward. So the answer on the first one, yes, it was definitely primarily denying responsibility. And so I do want to want to address all of these scenarios, we'll have some form of shifting the blame, right? Because that's the concept we're talking about. But we're definitely dealing with denying responsibility on that one, because one, Alex is shifting the blame to the marketing team, right? Avoiding directly admitting that he was at fault, and then he began to make excuses rather than owning up to the lack of work that he presented. So let's move on to scenario 2. So Crystal and her partner Chris, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I had it right. Crystal and her partner Chris had a clear agreement that they would call if they were going to be late coming home from work. Chris comes home very late, several hours past the agreed upon time, and didn't call. Crystal is understandably upset and expresses her concern. So the conversation goes like this: Chris, we agreed you'd be home if you were going to be this late. I was really worried. Chris responds, late? I'm not that late. You're exaggerating as usual. You always blow things out of proportion. Crystal, but it's been 3 hours and you didn't call. We had a plan. Chris, no, we didn't. You're imagining things. You have a terrible memory. I would have remembered that conversation. Honestly, you're acting crazy right now. I'm starting to think you don't trust me at all. Why are you trying to start a fight? Which key point goes to this scenario and why?
We judge and we don't listen.
I'll listen and I'll judge. That's all of them. And I got to give a caveat to that. Dude, I went to public school. My attention span ain't that long. But yeah, as you were reading it and saying it, I'm up there just checking them off as they go. And this person was gaslight. No, this ain't really happened. We ain't had no agreement. And shifting the blame and denying responsibility, projecting fault, playing. Now, hey, I don't know why you even coming at me like that. See, but that's obvious. And that's one of those things where people have in their lives people that obviously act like this, obviously blame shift, yet we just say, oh, well, that's just rolling. That's how he is. And you keep rolling around and allow him to be in your life, and he never is forced to change, so he's comfortable. When you say, dude, you got to bounce, so we don't need you around, then he's either forced to change or he got to go. Your situation with Chris and Crystal, but yeah.
So you wanted us to answer one of these ones, and then you wanted something else. What was the other thing that you wanted? Just want to confirm. Make sure, because I forgot.
I was just pointing out why you attached.
Oh, why you picked that one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, man. Darn it, rolling. I see all of them, and then I wanna throw in another one, and there's ineffective conversation and ineffective communication. You know what I mean? I mean, all of these things right here, it seem like some of these things could have been prevented well in advance with proper communication. Like Chris knew that he should have called, but because he's gaslighting and denying responsibility, he ain't going to do that. It's a lot going on in this little scenario right now. I mean, it's a whole lot going on. Like, this don't seem like the relationship that we even really need to be talking about. You know what I mean? They probably need to throw this thing in the river. You know what I'm saying? But no, I'm just picking. Honestly, when you have an immature relationship or sometimes a young relationship with people are not mature and stuff like this, some of these things happen on a regular basis, and good, bad, or indifferent. I know I'm probably been through some of this stuff, probably all of them times two. So like, why all of these ones? I mean, I would pretty much have to reread the whole thing and just say all of the things again. So pretty much from start to finish, like Roland said, you could just go through and just check off all of the different things that was going on in the scenario.
Man, y'all trust Crystal too much. Y'all think Crystal telling the truth and think he lying. Chris lying. First of all, Chris and Crystal shouldn't even be. Chris and Crystal shouldn't even be. No, I'm joking. Now based upon the scenario, man, it's all of
them. In the words of where'd it go? In the words of Nick D, Chris playing all kinds of games.
But like Coach said, you know, we pretty much it's just like what's love got to do with it? That was only told from Tina's side. You know, Ike had his side, good, bad, or indifferent. This was pretty much told from one person's view, you know, so from Crystal's view. So maybe they really didn't have these conversations. Maybe Crystal the one who gaslighting. Because she upset. Because she didn't like how she ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen both sides. I've seen the side where, well, even if she's lying, then she's gaslighting, right? At least the way I'm looking at it, right? If she's lying, she's gaslighting because she's changing his reality. If he's lying, then it's all of them because
But his conversation leads you to know that they had a conversation about it because he says, "I'm not that late." He acknowledged we talked about being late. I'm not that late. You're exaggerating as usual. So we talked about this before. You exaggerate as usual. You always blow things out of proportion. So we had a conversation at length about this same thing, and you saying we ain't talk about it at all. So I can't trust nothing Chris saying. Chris trying to get over.
I can vibe with that too.
Fact.
So,
yeah, and really, I 100% agree with that actually, because if he's gaslighting that hard, then he trusts that it will work because he's done it before. And I think you need counseling if you're constantly accepting that kind of behavior. There's something about you that's causing you to hold on to this relationship that is obviously toxic. It's manipulation going on, and you're holding on to it for what? So I agree.
I do have one caveat, right? I promise y'all I'm not being messy. I want to, because Nick D said, Crystal said we agreed. That means a discussion was had. I can't see her creating a whole elaborate false scenario. What would be the point? I wish you could walk a day in the shoes of a man. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being for real. Like there could be conversations had and someone could be sharing what they went through, and in their mind, them sharing what they went through is them saying they don't want to go through it again, and then you sympathize with their situation, therefore conversation was had. We never had that conversation. You was only telling me about your past. I never said anything in relation to who I would be, what I would do, whatever the case may be. So I get what you're saying, and I'm agree with what you're saying on one side. Yep, 5555555. Call me. I got something for you too when you call. However, there's another side of it. It's a lot of those conversations are not conversations. If you don't get a vocal reply about a conversation that you think you're having, you did not have that conversation. A lot of times, and I'm just being transparent, a lot of times people will have a conversation that includes me, and you're just along for the ride. If that person didn't vocally agree or comply with what you said, y'all didn't have a conversation.
Did you say people or women? No, I'm messing with you. No, let me stop.
No, it's poor man, Dr. Phil.
I got to join in on the messy session, man.
I like them.
And Crystal, I use Crystal with a K, so it's different people now because I put a K on it. Right.
I can tell who was who. Crystal and Chris, them two names. I was trying to. I'm like, who is like? What are we talking about? Who are we talking about? Are they friends? No, but I think we figured it out.
So, Coach, I think you might need. Let's see. Lisa said some may not reply because they don't want to comply, and they don't have any intentions of being honest.
It's a lot of assumptions in that statement, a lot of them. So I get what you're saying. And if there is a scenario to where that is true, but there's also a scenario to where you're expressing hurt. It doesn't require me to comply. It just requires me to listen. So if I try to have a conversation which you're expressing something that you still have not yet healed from, I think sometimes what ends up happening is that, again, going back to what I said, we're having a conversation from a hurt place and assuming that because the person that's listening is actually agreeing with and siding with the thing that they've been through. And in their mind, that's a whole conversation. So like I said, I got what you're saying, but I will caution against this sweeping assumption that we're making here, because there's a lot of things that there's a lot of places to where that statement comes from.
Do you brothers got anything on that? I agree.
Hey, don't be scared.
Don't be scared. Hey, but I mean, and in general, I do agree. She said I was speaking in general, and I do agree. Like Coach said, there is a scenario where this is true. But I think if you need a response from me, and this is how I look at it in communication, you experts can help me. But if you're requiring a response while you're sharing your hurt, or if you're sharing it because you want me to know that I need to behave a certain way to be with you, you need to express that. You need to express that you require a response or a reaction to, because you don't know how I'm going to take it. I'm just listening to you, and but like you said, it doesn't mean I need to respond because you're sharing your experience. You're sharing your hurt. But if you want me to respond, say so. Say, because I've seen men and women do it. Say, I've been through this, where this has happened to me in the past, and if we're going to be in a relationship, this is something that I require. This is my boundary with the thing. Blah 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 blah. Can you do this? Can you be that? And that once you ask that question, now it elicits a response from me. But if you just say this has happened to me in the past, and I go, oh man, that don't mean I acknowledge that I won't be or won't do. I just acknowledge that it happened.
Right. But sometimes people will talk and talk and talk, and then they will want you didn't ask me. You ain't got nothing to say. It's not my conversation. You had a bunch to say, but now you want me to give you feedback I give feedback when asked information, when asked questions. But if you want me to give feedback on how you feel, I can't give you feedback on how you feel about a situation. I can only give you feedback on what you asked me, or if something I'm involved with. But if this is solely you and how you see it and you want me to feed your ego, because that's what I think that becomes, me feeding your ego, not me helping the situation. Now, if we're going to talk about things, let's talk about things. Let's get specific and not go around about where you talk about everything that you don't like, everything that you have a problem with, because all I'm going to do is sit back and listen, because if I chime in, you're going to cut me off, and I'm doing this, that, and the other. So that's why I listen. Now, when you ask for feedback, I give feedback to what's being asked of me, not how you feel.
And that kind of goes back to the first scenario, Alex, right? Sometimes people have a insecurity about being direct with some of the things that they're saying, asking direct questions. So they try to do it in a passive aggressive fashion, right? They go all around this, or all the way around the corner, hoping that you fill in the blanks. Don't leave it to where a person needs to fill in the blanks. If you are trying to get them to understand a thing, speak directly to them.
That's why I hate when they ask the question at the end, what you think? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then they say, well, you just being rude. No, I'm not being rude. I don't like you trying to pull me into a box that I'm not in, and you want me to feel how you feel, because I don't have the same connection to it, whereas you do. So if you help me understand what you're trying to get me to, how you get me to move in here, then we can have a conversation, because it's something that you're trying to unpile on me.
I ain't know if you had something, Unc. All right. Make sure I don't get lost in my scenario. So, scenario number 3. You've had a really tough day at work. Your boss criticized your work in front of your colleagues, and you're feeling hurt and humiliated. You go home and you tell your partner what happened, and the conversation goes like this. Say, I'm upset. My boss totally ripped me apart in a meeting today. I was so embarrassed. It was so embarrassing. Your partner responds, oh, come on. It wasn't that bad. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You respond, but everyone was there, and it felt really personal. Your partner responds, everyone gets criticized at work sometimes. You're just being too sensitive. You need to toughen up. But I felt really humiliated. Your partner, well, maybe you shouldn't take things so personally. It's just work. What say you?
I almost want to ask, do it. No, I ain't gonna ask. Oh man, I don't know, man, because I think that I'm trying not to. I think the only way I can answer it would have to be, I would have to almost know the genders of this thing. I'm trying to not know the genders because I think it's different. I think it's different. I don't know, man. You gotta come back to me.
I'm saying this.
Can you take the gender out of it?
That's what I'm trying to do, but that's what I'm trying to do.
I think it's a very immature conversation on both sides. And this would be taxing to me. And for them to come talk to somebody like me, they would say, oh, he rude, he heartless, he don't have no feelings. No, I don't have no time for this mess. You crying. It's like one person coming talking about everybody against me, the world is against me, and the other person say, it ain't everybody. And one person playing the victim, the other person is minimizing everything. It's like this whole set of dialogue is saying that these two people cannot help each other in a conversation. That's what it's saying to me. Because they're one person just trying to unload and express themselves and want to shift the blame to everybody at work and my boss and just woe is me and life is bad, while the other person is saying it ain't that bad, it can't be this, and it's like you ain't listening to the person. Listening to the person to say, hey, that not that you gotta have an answer for everything, but sometimes you gotta be able to turn that thing around. When people focus on the negative is what they get. So if you constantly go there, you got to say, okay, what was your part in it?
There is only one answer. There it is. That's the answer right there. I'm sorry. I am so against that. Bringing work home and okay. Anyway, so I'm with rolling on this. Both sides is problematic. First and foremost, if let's just assume that I'm the person at home and then the other person comes home and talking about work. I have no idea in relation to what you're sharing with me whether or not you invited that conversation because you didn't do your job. That's the first thing. So even in the midst of that, that person themselves might be playing victim. They could be shifting blame themselves. They could even be gaslighting me in relation to what reality is at work. That's where I will start at. But then the other side within the space of the conversation, and I really don't necessarily like number three as being minimizing or invalidating feelings, because at the end of the day, um, that's a whole nother conversation about validating somebody else's feelings. Again, that kind of goes back to what I said previously. Like, we take stock in the information that people give us, and then what ends up happening, that just continues to perpetuate the same cycle of nothingness. Do I really need another person to validate how I feel about a thing? No, because my feelings are for me, and my feelings are designed to help me understand what I am trying to learn from the environment. I don't need another person to validate it. And if I need another person to validate it, that is problematic for me. Go get help. Go sit on, like Nick D said, go lay on somebody else's couch, right? But in this scenario, again, you can hear every one of these examples that we gave, from 1 to 5, denying responsibility all the way down to playing victim.
I think I'm ready to answer, but I may be asking another question. I don't know. So I don't know. Like, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm looking at it from my past experience as a boss, right? So just hang in there with me, right? So if we're looking at just this part right here, you've had a really tough day. Your boss criticized your work in front of your colleagues. I have been that NCO in the military where I have destroyed people in front of people, right? And I know I have hurt and humiliated people, and I know they probably went home and cried. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. And I did learn how to change my ways, as I started progressing through the ranks and stuff like that. But and I've also embarrassed people, and I know that they were fine because they could take it, but until I realized who I could and couldn't, there were some times where I know I've hurt some people and they may have went home and cried. So I've destroyed this person in front of everybody, and now that person goes home and crying. I don't know if I can just say a blanket statement that they should have just left work at work. You know what I'm saying? I understand leaving work at work all day long, but I also understand, from a boss's point of view, and the impact that you can have on someone else's life by humiliating them in front of people. So I don't know if that's a question or what. I just kind of want to know you guys' feedback on what do you think about that.
Since I put it out there, I'll go first. Why is my boss that significant to me? That's the first question I got to ask myself. Like, we've all been in the same army. And sure, I've destroyed people in front of people before, and I've gotten destroyed in front of people, and I never took it home. So at the end of the day, I got it. Somebody just said it. Everybody's different. No, you're not. You're kidding yourself. You're not different. We're all the same. We just have minor differences. That's it. We all have minor differences. Stop focusing on the minor and focus on the major, right? At the end of the day, when you, and again, this is just hypothetical. I get it. But at the end of the day, most supervisors, and we're just using the term destroy, so y'all just kind of humor us for a second. At the end of the day, most supervisors or people in leadership position do not embarrass a person in front of the entire team until they failed the entire team. And when they failed the entire team, it's generally a series of questions that get to the root cause of the problem. And then 9 times out of 10, that person may be rejecting, going back to blame shifting, they may be blame shifting and saying, well, this person didn't do this and this person. So you'll be in the space of meetings where all of these things will happen. Are there leaders who do not have the maturity, like they have to mature in their position? Absolutely. That applies for everybody who is a brand new leader. But then by that same token, I don't think no leader come to work and say, hey, I'm going to destroy Gaddy today. That's my intention. That's my sole purpose in life, right? So I think at some point there's a shared responsibility that existed in that space. But for me to focus on what my supervisor did is me also totally rejecting and neglecting what I did or didn't do. And if I pay more attention to that, well, you know what? Maybe that on the spot public, barrage of words, maybe I needed that to kind of motivate me. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but again, I'm going back to the point, why is your supervisor that important to where you got to bring it home and now, y'all don't judge me, don't come for me unless I send for you. And now go home and infect the entire home environment because now I'm in a situation to where I can't handle my emotions within the job setting. And again, I'm not saying that the supervisor was right. I'm saying that we're raising a bunch of people who don't necessarily have the level of resiliency that they need to deal with the world that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Again, did it happen? Yes. Was it right? No. But why am I bringing it home? That's where I'm at.
I like it.
I'm with Coach. I got a question. Am I trying to do my job or am I trying to please my supervisor? Because if I care so much about how they feel and what they said about me, to me, it's one of those things like, man, I'm trying to please this person so much. So it says something about you. It says something about you because the person, it says something about my feeling hurt and humiliated. Hurt and humiliated leads me to think that you really care about what that person feels about you more than what you feel about yourself. So it, like Coach just said, it's about your ego. He or she hurt my ego. Now I'm in my feelings. Now I'm gonna bring it home. And I've been in that situation to where as a leader, someone comes home and says, my leader said this and it did this to me. And I took the side of the leader. So now I'm a bad guy because I took the side of right. Because I don't care about how you feel. Was it right? Did you do your job? Okay, he could have said it sweeter, could have made it pretty. But at the end of the day, he's not there to be your friend. He's there to be your supervisor and to get the job done. And if he got to add a little pressure, that's what he or she has to do. So you can't go into a job and be in your feelings. You have to be able to say, okay, yeah, I did mess that up. And I understand how this person is responsible, as we talked about before, because they hold the responsibility of everyone's mess ups, not just their own. So that includes you. So now, since they're taking accountability, they have to add a little pressure to you. We've all done that. When soldiers failed us, we had to add a little pressure. We took the whole responsibility for it, but we got to come and add pressure. So now next time this situation happens, you don't do it again. Now you're going to think about this whole situation right now.
I'm kind of torn between Charlotte Jordan and Lisa Keys on this one, right? Because y'all kind of messed up my twist at the end of this scenario because I had it written on there. No reason why I said it, because I do agree with what y'all saying, because in my mind, after I wrote this scenario, I was thinking in my head, well, what if that's Alex that went home and got mad because he got ripped into, but he got ripped into in the meeting because he didn't do his part, and so I think Roland brought that up. So thank you for messing up my little plot twist at the end. But that's a real thing. But I'm and the reason why I'm torn between the two is because as a man, I have not been married to nor have dated any woman that was able to leave work at work. And I'm not being funny, but whether it's about the boss, about the co-workers, about the people gossiping, or whatever the case may be, they bring that home. And as the man, I was taught, and I know this is how we were taught, so I'm just bringing it up. But as the man, I was taught, hey, you got to be able to listen. She's not always looking for a response. She's not always, she just wants you to hear what her express what she was going through at work. And sometimes just letting her get it out helps her process and move forward. I see that as a reality. So if that's the case, to me, I'm looking at it as well. If I go forward and minimize what she's feeling, in her mind, I just invalidated her feeling. I know what you're saying. Like, I don't need to validate your feelings, but I also don't need to invalidate them. Make you feel like you're wrong for feeling what you're feeling. Sometimes I just need to let you get it out. I see Coach's face, but what's your thoughts on that?
We ain't got time to get what I want to say. I'm just saying, if I can't, and I really hate to use the term responsibility, but I will start there. If it's not my responsibility to validate, then how is it my responsibility not to invalidate? Like, I think sometimes, and that kind of goes back to what I said about resiliency, I think sometimes people need to be told the truth, regardless of whether it validates or invalidates. Forget invalidate or validate. Let's just tell the truth. If we just tell the truth, however it hits, let it be. Because I think a lot of times what we try to do is soften the blow of reality, but it's not my job to soften the blow of reality, because when I soften the blow of reality, you're now you're now missing the point of what you were supposed to get from reality. So now what ends up happening is that it has to come back around because you didn't get the point. You didn't learn the lesson. And the lesson now that is learned is that if this happens, all I got to do is go back to, my husband, or go back to my wife, and they're going to make me feel good about what I'm going through. So I caution against that, because again, you're setting a precedence that makes you need it, right? And I'm using that term intentionally, that makes you need it in the future. And when you allow a person to set the precedence that makes you need it in the future, you will always have to perform at the level of their need. It is absolutely enabling.
Is listening and not responding enabling?
That's not what you said. You said validating or invalidating.
I said
if I don't respond, sometimes some people may perceive that as invalidating because you didn't say anything. You didn't say the thing that helped me to understand that you understand how I'm feeling and what I'm going through.
Now, to me, that's not my job, because that's validating your feelings. But I think that sometimes I'm expressing things, and it don't mean that I'm looking for a right or wrong in this scenario, but I just need to express it before I blow up. And if I'm wrong, you can express that I'm wrong, but maybe I'm thinking as a man, tell me I'm wrong, and I can take that accountability. But I don't know, but sometimes I just need you to listen. Sometimes I just want to get it off my chest because it bothered me, and I had to sit there at that workplace for another 6 hours with that person, knowing that I want to address it. But maybe some people, and when who was it that talked about, trying to please the boss and all that? Some bosses create that environment when you get on the job that the only way to have a peaceful work environment is you please the boss. And so some people do.
And if you allow that case, that's your fault. So now if you want to vent to me because your boss isn't pleased with your performance, I'm going to tell you the truth. You set the conditions for that.
And here's the other thing, I think someone you might have mentioned it, when you think about this, when we come home, we talking about we want to have peace in our home, right? So when you bring chaos from the street, or you bring things, and I understand the intent and the wanting to bring work home, because I do it sometimes too, but I am going to go back and rethink, some of this conversation, because I think sometimes separation is good. I think sometimes it's okay to talk about work, but I think we have to be careful about the things that we decide to talk about when it comes to work. You know what I mean? Because if we want our house to be a place of peace, then why bring chaos from work? Why bring that into the house? Maybe come into the house, take you some minutes, go talk to your homeboys, call me, hey, I got some stuff going on. Call your boy, maybe try to figure out a way to get rid of that. So when you come at home, even if you're not 100% at peace, you can walk into a space that is peaceful, but at least you're not bringing things into the home. So I can definitely see why I've always heard where people say leave work at work. You know what I'm saying? Because you're inviting certain things into your house.
I think it's always okay to decompress. Whether you got to get it out, whatever, go play basketball, do whatever you got to do to decompress. But I ain't got a problem with that. What I got a problem is looking for someone else to help me fix this. That's not on my job. I'm not there to help you fix that problem. I can be on your side and be your little cheerleader all day, but that'll get tiresome. And now you gonna look for me to be that. And then when I side on the side of the people at work, now I'm the enemy. Now my house is in disarray because I allowed this toxic environment to come fester in my living room, and you want to argue with me about why somebody else is right. And I don't know the parties or anything, but I'm just like, okay, I'm just making common sense of it, and you're in your emotions.
I'm with it. Man, first I want to thank the chat for hanging with us while we journeying through this. But we're going to jump to the last scenario, and then we're going to jump into our final thoughts. Scenario number 5. So, and I know I'm dealing with work a lot because I feel like it's an easy place for us to be objective. A team project at work failed to meet the deadline. Sarah was responsible for a crucial part of the project, but didn't complete it on time. So here's a conversation. The boss says to Sarah, the project deadline was missed. Your section wasn't finished. What happened? Sarah, I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I really tried my best, but everything went wrong. First, my computer crashed and I lost a whole day's work. Then I got a terrible migraine and I couldn't even look at the screen. And on top of that, nobody offered to help me. I was completely overwhelmed, and I'm always the one who gets stuck with the hardest task and nobody cares. Which one would you attribute to that?
Playing the victim, projecting faults, denying responsibility. Because nobody does care. It's not their responsibility to care. So it's on you.
Yep. Say the same thing. I ain't got nothing to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear cut and, black and white to me. Yeah, it's simple to me.
Simple, yeah.
Did we lose Gary? Oh, okay.
My apologies. Had to let the kids in. Did everybody already ran through this one? Oh man, that was 2 seconds to go open the door. Man, I apologize. So this was definitely playing the victim, right? Because she was focusing on her suffering, avoiding responsibility, blaming others, and creating a narrative of helplessness, seeking sympathy to deflect criticism. And to be honest with you, at least as a supervisor and as a NCO, I think this is one of the most common things that I see when people fail to complete a task or to meet a deadline. And I don't know why that seems to be the go-to, is to make themselves the victim to create sympathy so that you don't come down on them. But all in all, I think we got a real good picture, and especially in this last one, of what shifting the blame looks like, or evading responsibility as a whole. And on the flip side, I think understanding what that negative looks like creates an opportunity for us to become more accountable. Like I said in the beginning, I looked at this topic as a way of not just identifying what other people do wrong, but being able to see when we actually show up in these scenarios and we take accountability and move forward. With that said, it's our bittersweet moment where we move into our final thoughts of the night.
I think that we've definitely talked at length about blame shifting and demanding accountability, but we need to give also some ways that we can work on our ability to take accountability. And some of those elements are, first and foremost, acknowledgement. Acknowledge your part. Don't point the blame at anybody else. Acknowledge how you affected the outcome of whatever the scenario is, whatever the job was. And be honest. You got to be honest, not with just everyone else, but be honest with yourself, whether or not you put the proper effort in, whether or not you did a job that was subpar or to standard, and take responsibility for that part. That way, you're not shifting the blame on anyone else. You're taking responsibility and saying, okay, it's mine. Also, after that's done, take action to do better, to make sure that you do better, not just next time, but even in this. If you can rectify a situation, or you can do it again to make sure you do it better, and then follow through. Make sure that you follow through with everything that you do, so you won't have situations to where you have last minute tasks that you had 3 weeks to do, but you can manage them during the time frame, set up a calendar or whatever you have to do, so that at the end of the day, when the buck stops at you, you can say, I've done all that I needed to do. That's all I have.
I think this was a very good conversation. This kind of reminds me, I had a friend, and I do mean had a friend, he passed away some years ago, but we had a conversation about 10 years ago. And he called me, and he was really venting. He was upset because his wife did a thing. And I mean, he was really laying into this conversation. He was crying. He was upset. He was expressing himself out loudly, and she was in another room. And I let him get it all off his chest. And at the end of that conversation, I asked him a question. I said, what are you looking for in response of me? He said, well, you're my friend. He said, I want you to respond how you know to respond. I said, well, all that you just told me, get off the phone with me and go around there and say that to her, because she's the one that needs to hear it. You're having this conversation with me on the phone is probably going to make her feel a particular type of way once you get off this phone, because instead of you talking to her, you were talking to me. And I think that's the whole point behind all of this. When we start looking at blame shifting and things of that nature, a lot of us avoid having honest conversations with each other. A lot of us avoid saying the things that need to be saying the things that need to be said. A lot of us also struggle from just being coddled. Like, you really need to go read the book. I know you can't see it. It's that book right there. It's a red book, and it's called The Coddling of the American Mind. Some of us are still struggling because we have this coddled mindset that says, oh, I need this person to do this for me. I need this person to do. No, you don't. Stop that. It's time to come out of that mindset and grow up and take charge of your own life so that you can be beneficial to others, not so much a hindrance. A lot of times we put things on other people and expect them to do a thing for us that they have no business doing. And then when they accept that, now it becomes a responsibility metric that we actually have for ourselves. So I want to make sure I'm saying that. Also, I got a poll in the chats. So if you're on YouTube, click on the poll. Let us know what you think about this conversation, because I think this conversation is great. So that's my final thought, and look forward to the rest of them.
I think that when it comes to blame shifting, at some point we have found ourselves on either side of this. And sometimes throughout our relationships, sometimes we are one and sometimes we're the other, or that may have happened. And I think as we mature, the more we mature, I think we grow to a point to where we stop blaming others for our actions. We start taking responsibility. We start taking accountability for how our life has panned out and how our lives are currently and how they will be in the future. So I would just look at, if you are on either side of this, I would just challenge anybody, just like Coach said, that book, The Calling of an American Mind, that's a great book. I've read it as well. And I think that, when you grow and you work on yourself, you can look at some of these situations that you may have in your life. And if you are a victim of blame shifting, or you're in a relationship with someone who is always blame shifting, then, take a look at it and just look at that relationship overall and ask yourself, why ain't going to do that? But just take a look at the relationship and see if that's a healthy relationship for you moving forward. And if you are someone who is blame shifting, then look at some of the things that you may be able to do in order to stop that. Because if you are that person, then you are probably affecting someone else's life in a negative way. So that's my final thought for this evening.
I've come to realize that one of the hardest things that we do as human beings is taking accountability. Not because we don't like to know how we can get better, but sometimes taking accountability recognizes that some of the things that we were taught were not correct. I remember being a young soldier in the military, and I switched to another S1 shop, and I just knew I knew what I needed to know. I was so I knew everything. I could teach you how to be a 42. I could teach you how to work and do every job in the S1. And a question was asked of me by someone coming into the shop, and I gave an answer, quick response. And my NCOIC, she walks out and she says, where did you get that answer from? And my response was, well, my former NCOIC taught me. And she said, hold on. Don't ever come in my shop and tell me what your previous NCO taught you. Tell me what the regulation says. And so for me, that was a hard pill to swallow, because that first NCO was kind of like my marker. I set my marker right there because that's what they taught me. That's the first NCO I knew. And when it came time for me to move on and show that knowledge that I've learned, I come to find out that that knowledge may not be true, may not have been correct. Maybe that's the way that they did it because it was easier or it worked, but it don't mean that it was the correct way of doing things. And so accountability sometimes causes us to recognize that maybe mommy wasn't right. Maybe daddy wasn't correct. Maybe uncle didn't teach me the right way. Maybe big bro was wrong. And sometimes that's okay. The goal is finding the proper way of doing it and bettering ourselves every day. It's not about validating mommy or daddy or validating that I was brought up the best. It's about getting to the right answer, making our relationship work. Because the most important part of a relationship, as Coach would tell us, is not you, it's not the other person, it's the relationship. So that's what's important. So I will caution us to be mindful. Let's embrace accountability moving forward. With that said, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I think it was a good conversation. I had a good time with my brothers tonight. Thank y'all for, keeping me going with this one. I I do want y'all to remember everything we say too. Like Onk said, go back and ponder on a lot of the stuff we said, because I will. I'm gonna go back and read my notes and read the stuff that I was reading again, because I want to address me and I want to get better at what I do. But at what we do, we have some stuff going on. Tomorrow, I believe at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, we got the hearts of women, right? So Crystal Everett asked for her personal post. Says 15 of us online. Well, I see you all, plus the hearts of men at 10:30. So I will do my best to be there. I'm pretty sure my brothers will as well. And the chat, that's a part of our accountability, right? She calling us out. So let's support. Let's be there tomorrow morning. Coach, you wanna bring us to the rest of the week? What we got going on?
Yeah. Again, tomorrow morning, 10:30, Hearts of Women. Sunday morning, 11:30 on TikTok Live. We do Sunday's brunch. I will be hosting, and then Bible study at 2:00, and then Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is Coach's Corner. So yeah, there you have it.
Yes. And with that said, thank you all. I appreciate you all, and go ahead and have a great rest of your week, and maintain your availability for everybody you know, love, and our relationship with.